Welcome back, guys, to another part of this What If. Um, I don't know per se if you did enjoy the first part, and to be honest, I wouldn't say it was the best beginning to a video that I've made. Sorry, but it's okay. I have gotten the introduction done for the first part, and I introduced what I was gonna do with this. So I'm just gonna start off from where I left off. So me and Itachi would be, I said Itachi, sorry. Itachi would be running through the forest. And while running through the forest, Itachi would ask, he'd go, so where are we going now, Sensei? My bad. And I just dropped my mic. Give me a second. Alright, I'm back. And as I was saying, Itachi would say, so where to now? Since we cannot return to the village. And I'd tell him, I'd go, well, we don't necessarily have to, since we can go to the village I was telling you about the other day. And he'd go, what do you mean? And I'd say, oh, so you don't remember? Well, I told you that I have a place we can go to once we get, kicked out of the village. And it's a village in of itself that I put together because I was never around my family much, and I only used to hang out with Naruto until obviously he found out he was one of the children of prophecy, and Itachi would say, "Oh, I see. So, what will we do once we get there?" I'd say, "Well, the veil is right in front of us, and since you're with me, you'll be able to go through it." And he'll be like, "What veil? There's nothing there." And I'd say, "Well," and then I'd reach out my hand after we had walked up close enough to the veil, and my hand would go through it. And once he'd see my hand disappear, he'd be like, "Oh, so is this the place you were talking about?" And I'd go, "Yes, yes, it is." And we would walk inside the veil, and once we'd walk in, and we'd be walking towards. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna change the name of this village because I did not like the one I came up with yesterday. I was kind of tired. But as I said, so the name of this village will be. Give me a second. It will be called. Sorry, my bad. But it'll be called the Village of the Forgotten. And so we'd be walking to the first Kage of of the village I created. And once we'd walk into the office, he'll kneel. He'd get out of his chair and kneel at me. And I'd say, no need. And he'd say, so, sir, what brings you here? And who is this? And I'd tell him, I'd say, well, this is a friend of mine. His name is Itachi Uchiha. The guy I told you that I'd be bringing when I sent the shadow clone here. And he'd say, oh, and he'd shake Itachi's hand before going back to sit inside of his desk. And I'd say, so, do you have any missions we can start doing? Because, I want to get some actual, training in with this body. And he'd exclaim, yes, well, you see, we sent out, this village that sent us this request had actually requested it from the Leaf Village first, but the people of the Leaf did not accept it because they didn't have the funds to pay the Leaf, like in that moment. And I'd look at Itachi, I'd say, so Itachi, you want to do this mission? And he'd look at me and he'd smile. He'd say, yes, sure. But do you have a sword of any type and any type of Uchiha scrolls or any type of jutsu scrolls or scrolls that have jutsu on, whatever you want to call them. I'll just say scrolls that have jutsu on them. And I'd say, yeah, we have a lot. And I actually have some forbidden Uchiha scrolls too. And he'd be like, how and from who? And I'd exclaim, I'd say, well, I met this Uchiha and he was telling me about how this world is corrupt and stuff. And I exclaimed to him that in exchange for, you know, him, like me saving his life, he wouldn't, like choose the war path until like it's absolutely like needed. And he was like, yes. And in exchange for me giving him his youth and his prime back, he gave me a couple of Uchiha scrolls, and he usually watches over the village. And then all of a sudden, Madara would appear, and I'd say, "This is Madara Uchiha," and I'd look at Madara, and I'd say, "Hey, Madara, you feel like training this guy for me? He's a prodigy among prodigies, and he'll be beneficial to this village." And he'd look at Itachi and notice that Itachi seemingly do not like anything, but like when it came down to the people he loved, he could tell that Itachi would do anything. But he has a sense of duty, and he would choose, like his duties over his family. But he could tell there's something in him that would be an exception to that goal. So he didn't start preaching his ideals onto Itachi, but he'd rather train Itachi for about a month. And then me and Itachi would set off on this mission. And Madara would exclaim that me and Itachi should be enough since it's just we're kicking someone out of a village. But if we need him, send a messenger bird and he'll be there instantly. And I would exclaim to him, sure, but we probably won't need your help. As you said, it's just we're just kicking someone out of the village, and his goons he hired shouldn't be that strong. And so, this being the Land of Waves mission, me and Itachi would start heading that way. And since my village isn't that far away from it, we'd arrive there in about 30 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes. And I'd look at Itachi, and we both jumped down from the trees, noticing a puddle. Well, we wouldn't be there, but like we'd be at this puddle in about 30 to 35 minutes. And I was gonna tell Itachi that we have a couple more minutes till we make it to that village. No, my bad. I meant to say 15 minutes. Ooh, he might be sick. He might have to go get that checked out. But Itachi being able to read the chakra signature. And I'd notice after Itachi looked at the photo, I'd say, "Is that a photo?" And he'd be like, "Yeah." And we'd both go behind the tree, jump down, walk from out of the woods, and then pretend that we're just walking. And we'd pass it, but then all of a sudden we'd disappear, and we'd both exclaim "release" as the two brothers would come out, and they'd go to wrap up Itachi, who would body flicker and cut off one of the brothers' heads, and I'd kick the other brother into a tree and tie him up using the brother's chain. And I'd say, "So who sent you? And if you don't tell me the truth, I'll kill you. And I'll kill you in a way that'll make it seem like hell is a toy. So tell me, who sent you?" And he would look at me, being terrified. And then he'd look over at Itachi, who'd have his Sharingan active. And I'd say, "So you want to talk, huh? Itachi." And Itachi was finna put him in a genjutsu when all of a sudden he lowered his head and he'd say, "A fat man named Gato." And I'd say, "All right, Itachi, you can release the genjutsu now." And he'd see his brother unconscious next to him, tied to the tree. We'd untie them, and I'd say, "Go to this address and ask for a guy named Madara. He'll he'll deal with you two. He will just let him know that I sent you. Tell him that a guy named Izuku sent you. So, but you better hope you can live up to his expectations, should I say?" And they would be confused. Well, the brother that was awake would be confused, but he didn't want to die, so he left with his brother on his back. And me and Itachi, who now know who our target is, would start dashing at the village at top speeds. And as I said, we'd make it to the village in 30 to 35 minutes because it took us 15 minutes to get to the Demon Brothers. And so now that we're in the village, we'd meet up with a guy named Tazuna who had just returned to the village after once again trying to bribe the Leaf for his help. I mean, for their help. But then we'd see him getting taken into a cell with a short, fat guy being there taunting him. And then I'd say, "Isn't that Zabuza of the Mist, the demon of the mist?" And Itachi would go, "Yes, that is Zabuza." And I'd smirk. I'd say, "Oh, this is gonna be fun." And Itachi would say, "You really do like to fight as much as Tsunade likes to drink." And I'd say, "What is that supposed to mean?" And he'd say that when it comes down to fighting, you're both alike. Well, when it comes down to fighting and drinking, you're alike. And I'd tell him, "Well, whatever happened doesn't matter because the only thing that'll matter later is fighting prowess." And then I'd notice a guy in a tree, since me and Itachi are wearing masks and cloaks. And I would look, and I'd throw a kunai at an incoming Sinban that was gonna hit Itachi. But then the nin would disappear. And Itachi would notice that the Sinban still had a trace of chakra on it. So he'd pick up the Sinban and he would look. He'd go, "Yo, Izuku, come look at this." And I'd say, "What is it?" He'd say, "Well, the Sinban you blocked, it belonged to a person named Haku." And I'd say, "You could tell all that from his chakra signature?" And he'd go, "Well, not just their chakra signature, but on this kunai, it had a type of name inscription on it. And it seemed to be from a person that this Haku person knew. Because the Cinnabon says, Haku is my tool." And Itachi would have kind of a angry type, an angry face. And I'd kind of be annoyed. I'd be like, "So, who wrote that?" And he'd go, "I don't know for sure who wrote it or who made this Senbon, but this Haku guy, he probably didn't know that he threw this. Because if he did, he would have probably had thrown a different one because he seems to be the assassin type or the type to kill with quick succession and then get out of dodge." And I'd go, "Well, I mean, but if he's working with Zabuza, then he still has to die." And Itachi would say, "Well, I don't know about die, but he does have to be taken down." And I'd go, "Fine, I won't kill them unless absolutely necessary." And he'd go, "Good, now let's calm down these people that are surrounding us." And I'd look and notice that a kid had walked up to me who had saw me throw the kunai. He'd say, "Get out of here. Get out of here now." And I'd look at him. I'd say, "What's wrong, kid? Did something happen?" He'd say, You're just gonna end up like my." Hold up, give me a second. Sorry about that. So I'd I'm gonna have to restart that part because I was in a conversation with my cousin and I kind of forgot. So as I said, the kid would walk up to me and say, "Get out of my village now," with a shaky voice, and he was looking down, but I could tell he was crying. And I'd go, "What's wrong, kid? Did something happen?" And he'd say, "Just get out of here. Because when you would try to be a hero, you'll just end up like my granddad and him." And he'd look at me with like a mad type of expression. And he'd go, "I'm getting tired of everyone thinking they can be heroes and trying to help this village. I'm tired of you, ninja. Why didn't you come earlier when it was first asked? When my grandfather first asked," he'd say. And he'd fall to his knees crying while still pulling on my shirt. And I'd look at him and I'd say, "Listen, kid, I'm not from the Leaf Village. And yes, I may be a ninja, And I may be part of the, like, my bad. I'd say, kid, I know I may be a ninja, but
Hey, who out there with them dogs?
give me a second. And I'd say, but I'm not from the leaf. And, well, I am from the leaf, but I'm not a leaf shinobi. And he'd go, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, I was banished, exiled, kicked out. I'm not allowed to even step foot within 10. I'm not allowed to step foot within a 50-meter radius of the village gates, kid. I'm no longer a leaf shinobi, and I'm quite glad that I'm not, I'd say. And the kid would look up and say, then what are you doing here? And if you're not a shinobi anymore, then I'd stop him there. I'd say, I never said I wasn't a shinobi anymore. I'm just not of the leaf anymore. And kid, I'm not trying to be some type of hero by helping you. I just want to do what's right. And when I found out that the Leaf Village didn't, want to help because you were low on the funds they had requested, it pissed me off. So I came to deal with it myself, and I brought along my friend. He's also from the Leaf and got exiled, banished, whatever you want to say. And he'd say, but you're just kids. How are you going to stop Gato and his men? And I'd say, the same way that we're going to go stop him from taking that man and doing whatever he plans to do with him. To, and he'd look and he'd say, that's my grandfather. And if you can bring him back to me, I'll believe you. And it's nighttime now. Like, that's like, it had gotten night once we had arrived, but it was like getting progressively darker. And I'd say, don't worry, I'll try to have him back to you by day. And me and Itachi would disappear, and this would shock him. He'd go, where did they go? And me and Itachi would be following, tailing after Gato and his men, and we'd notice Haku, but Haku wouldn't notice us because I taught Itachi how to hide his presence. Even though ninjas know how to hide their presence somewhat, assassins from the Zoldycks know how to hella hide their presence. So my presence is a bit more hidden than Itachi's, and Haku, who still didn't notice us, would jump out in the tree and exclaim to. He'd take off his mask and he'd exclaim to Zabuza that there's no one tailing them, and so they'd go inside the building. My bad. And once inside the building, they'd finally notice that there's two kids standing in front of the building. And Zabuza would yell at Haku, exclaiming, didn't you say that there isn't anyone following us? And he'd be yelling at him. And me and Itachi would walk through the building, noticing people in cages, and we'd also see Inari's grandfather, Tazuna. And I'd, but we don't know that his name is Inari yet. And I'd walk up to the old man's cage and I'd say, yo, old man, what's your name? Your grandson asked me to save you. And the rest of these people here are just a bonus. And I'd say, so do you know what the keys are? And Itachi would slap me on the back of the head saying, don't forget, we have to evict a guy named damn Gato. And I'd say, I didn't forget. You always save the fun part for last, don't you? And I'd smile at him, which would kind of creep him out that I said it like that, but meh. And he would look at me and he'd go, so, and I'd say, so you're not gonna finish your statement? And he'd tap my shoulder and point at Haku. I'd say, you got this? And he'd show a thumbs up, never taking his eyes off of Haku. Because he'd know for a fact that this is Haku because of the chakra signature. Because this was the chakra signature he was searching for. And I say, go nuts. I guess I'll fight Zabuza. And everyone in the cages would think, is he crazy? And Tazuna would grab me through the bars and he'd go, kid, I know you were trying to be some type of savior, but get out of here and get your friend too. Because fate, I'd rather be in this cage than try to force some kids to fight Gato and his men. There's too many of them. And I'd say, well, the men on the outside, the 132 people that me and Itachi defeated before coming in here, couldn't even touch us. That guy over there, I doubt he'd be able to touch or even injure Itachi. I mean, he'd probably, his first couple of moves and speed would kind of catch Itachi off guard. But Itachi right now, who's serious, he isn't mad at him. He's mad that this guy is listening to Zabuza, who seemingly treats him as a tool. And I'd look and I'd say, so Itachi, don't hold back. So about time I'm done beating Zabuza, you can come ask him yourself what's wrong. And why did he treat Haku like this? And he gave me a thumbs up. And Haku, he instantly feel that Itachi at this moment is a bit stronger than him and would instantly use the crystal ice mirrors. And Itachi would just stand there, not moving, kinda pissed in a sort of way. Because this is how the reason why Itachi is mad is because this is how he was treated by his family and in OG Naruto and in Naruto Shippuden. He was also kind of being used because he was helping the Leaf Village, and the people of the village thought that he was just some type of, like some type of bad guy monster that shouldn't be given any type of forgiveness. His own, he had to even trick his own brother. But that's for another day. Or you could just go watch Naruto, or you can search up on Google, Sasuke versus Itachi, or Obito telling Sasuke why Itachi did what he did. Either way, it doesn't matter. Stupid. My bad. So I'd say again. So where are the keys? And he'd say probably with Gato. And I'd say good enough for me. Two birds, one stone. And I'd disappear. And Itachi would. Then they'd be listening and watching the fight between Haku and Itachi, and they'd see Itachi just casually dodging all of the Sinban. And he'd ask, why? And Haku would say, what do you mean, why? And he'd go, why are you allowing yourself to be used like this, like a puppet, like some type of toy for him to use? And once you're not useful or not fun for him anymore, you could just be thrown away. And Haku would go, because that's exactly what I am to him. And I don't mind it, because he's my precious person in this world. He's the only one in this world that accepted me for me. And I'd look at it, and I'd look at the ground because I had heard this through, because I have amazing ears. And I'd glare at Zabuza. I'd say, you use him as a puppet? And Itachi, who would be using his chakra to. No, I'd link Itachi with my telepathy to hear the conversation between me and Zabuza. And Zabuza would start chuckling. And I'd yell, what's funny? And he'd go, because that's exactly what he is to me. He's just a toy, my tool. He's useful, but once he's no longer useful, or I find a tool more useful than him, then I'll just leave him, or even kill him so no one else can use him against me. And I'd be pissed. But then I could sense doubt in his voice. But then all of a sudden, Itachi would come, slamming Haku through the roof, like, well, to them, it's through the roof, but for us, through the floor. So he'd come through the floor, and me and Zabuza would jump and hang, but stand on the roof, and we'd land back on a different part of the ground. And Haku would be unconscious now because he isn't used to taking so many hits. He's used to just quickly killing and taking out his target. Damn it. Sorry. Kinda injured myself in a stupid way. Hold up, give me a second. Why are you ready? You holding the cream right there.
I know. You
I licked off these. You can just give me that cream.
I licked off.
Just put it right there.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
About to just you.
Sorry about that. I couldn't pause the video because I was kind of fixing the wet where I was sitting at. What? Why is you worried about my son?
They coming today. This day.
It ain't they, it's him. And why is you worried about my son, Junior, Courtney, about Ragtail? He's not technically my son.
Today?
Oh shit, I didn't pause YouTube. Sorry for not pausing that, but no, to answer your questions, no, Bon Ragtail isn't my actual kid. All right, and I'm going. Ooh, no, you don't. Ah, damn. Much better. So Itachi would lay the unconscious body of Haku in a bed. I mean, on the couch that's there, and he tells Zabuza, "Meet me outside." And Izuku, don't interfere. And Itachi would sense, who had sensed the hint of doubt, also wouldn't care at this moment. He'd ask him one question. Well, no, let me try that again. Sorry. Itachi, who had sensed that hint of doubt, would ask him when they got outside, why did it seem like you doubted your own answer? And what would come out of Zabuza's mouth next would piss Itachi completely off. What sense of doubt? I was truthfully and brutally honest with what I said. And if anything, if I could take you or that other brat over Haku, I would've. I'll even kill him just to have one of you two as my underling. Excuse me. What do you want? Why did I say it like that? What you talking about crystallized too? And so I'd I'd look. And by the way, if I said one of you brats, I meant to say just Itachi because he hasn't seen me fight. He just saw Itachi fight. Like he knows we both took out the minions outside, but they can barely fight from what I saw in Naruto. Sorry. And so hold up. Speaking of Bon Ragto, he's already. So as I was saying, oh yeah, Bon Ragto, you want to go ahead and say hello to my fans?
What up?
Yeah, I'm doing. What if I was in Naruto? Uh, I was just talking to Maya about you. She said that boy coming over here. Oh, like that boy. She was like, yeah, June. I said, oh, you talking about my son, Bon Ragto? And I was like, just to clarify that isn't my biological son, but that is my son. But so basically, what had happened in this video was that I'm a different type of Uzumaki, and basically I'm myself. Like my character, Ninja Meliodas, except for I also have a secondary name, Izuku Freak Zodiac. That's basically who I am, right?
Wow. No, you're explaining
I
to me
know.
what is going
Oh
on.
shit. Sorry about that. I'm wasting y'all time. Let me. I apologize for the interruption. But so I might, but I do know how to edit. I just choose not to. And sorry about that again. I just forgot to pause. I might edit all of this part where I was out, as he said, but ain't even gonna lie to you, I'd be way too lazy to edit stuff out. So, or I leave it in because I find it hilarious how randomly people just show up inside the during when I'm making videos. But yeah. So I look out the window and I'd see Itachi and Zabuza duking it out outside, and Itachi is winning. But it'd be weird because Itachi wasn't like holding back like he'd usually do during when we spar, or like when we went against the grunts, or even when he went against Haku. He would punch Zabuza, and then he'd draw his blade going behind him, and he'd slice him in the back. But Zabuza would block with his sword, avoiding getting cut. But then he'd create two shadow clones, and he'd end up slicing Zabuza anyway. And then he'd use a fireball jutsu to create distance. And he'd use his two clones to throw their blades at Zabuza, making him deflect it. And he'd go under Zabuza and elbow him in the stomach, and then he was going to slit his throat. Oh, this that dragonfly you were talking about? It still survived? On the porch. Oh my god. You posted the video? Yes. Yeah, it's the first part to this, and DG Takemichi's part 2. I don't see that. I don't see Takemichi. That's because it dropped at 2:35. The first part of this dropped at 2:35. It was green. The one that was over there behind the bin. Go see if it's one still over there by the bin. Cause if it is, then that ain't the right one. Sorry about that. But yeah. And when Itachi went to slit his throat, Zabuza would put his arm in the way, blocking it with his arm, and he would kick Itachi. But this would seemingly not phase Itachi at all. And then all of a sudden, Itachi's eyes would change, and a black flame would erupt on Zabuza's shirt. Zabuza would take off his shirt in a hurry, and his shirt would turn into nothingness, and the flames would disappear. And a bit of the flame would get on his blade, and he'd smirk as it covered his blade, and he'd notice his blade is starting to kind of melt. And so he used this opportunity to swipe at Itachi. And Itachi would look at the blade coming his way. And I'd be like, why is it moving? Then the blade would go through Itachi. And I'd be shocked. I'd be like, did he just kill him? But I see no blood. What's going on? And Zabuza, who swung the sword, would also be shocked. And he'd start rapidly swinging, but the blade would still go through him like as if nothing is happening. And Itachi would look up and say, I'm glad that you're trying so hard to kill me. And this also proves that you didn't care for Haku. Because if you did, I would have to hold back to try not to kill you. But now, I can just kill you without remorse. As he would thrust his blade, and it wouldn't impale him, but it hit Zabuza in the chest, and it sent him flying, kind of like how when Yami used his blade and hit with the tip of his blade, causing just sort of like that. Or if you play the new Demon Slayer game where Sabito does his special and then uppercuts the person with his blade and it doesn't cut him. Yeah, he basically does that except for as a thrusting, and he hit him directly in the chest, not at where his heart is, but like on side of his heart. And then Zabuza would cough out blood, but he'd get up anyway, knowing the damage he took, and he'd smile. He'd say, "Oh, brat, don't make this any boring. Don't make this boring, because I didn't come here to play around with Haku anyway. So stop talking about Haku and keep fighting." And then we do a bit of a time skip to 10 minutes later. And I jump in the way and I parry Itachi's blade with my nails, kind of making his blade hit the ground. And it gets stuck in the ground to where he can pull it out. Well, he could pull it out, but like he'd struggle a bit and then he'd pull it out of the ground and he'd say, "Move." And I'd say, "Calm down. The fight is already over." And then we'd see Zabuza with holes and cut wounds all over his body. He'd have 3 holes through his chest and his stomach each. He'd have all of his ribs broken, which had punctured one of his lungs. And he'd have a hole straight through his left eyeball, straight to the back of his head. Like you could see directly through that hole and see a tree that was directly behind him. And I'd say, I was letting you continue to get your anger out, but you're dismantling his body, and we need that for the reward money. And he'd look at me, and he'd go, "Sorry." I'd say, "No, it's fine. Sorry about that. I was eating my frozen cook. And so I'd seal Zabuza's body inside of a scroll. And I'd look at Haku, who had just woken up. He would ask, "Where's Zabuza?" And I'd say, "Dead." And Haku would be shocked. He'd say, "Who killed him? Where did they go?" And I'd say, "The killer is behind you. And the reason he killed him was for your sake." And Haku would start crying. He'd not know what to do. He'd be angry. He'd feel a bit of relief. But he'd be pissed. And so he'd dash at Itachi with his Senbon again. And he'd just go clean through Itachi. And Itachi would say, "I'm not fighting you. I understand that you thought highly of him, but I can't stand when people use others as pawns, as playthings." And I'd chime in saying, "If you want to fight someone, come on, I'll fight you. But at the moment, Itachi will not fight you. He did this for your own good." And Haku would point a needle at his own throat. And I'd say, "If you do that, you'll just be wasting the life that has just been spared for you. You can start over. You can be whoever you want, wherever you want, and you can do whatever the hell you want." And Haku would look at me and he'd say, "But that's not what I wanted." He'd say, I just wanted to, I just wanted him to see me as useful." And I'd unseal something that I had sealed with Zabuza, and it'd be a note, and it'd say, "For Haku." Zabuza had wrote a note, and he had sent it by bird, and it was gonna go to Haku, but I had killed the bird, and then he died. But basically, the note said, "I'm sorry that I was so tough on you, Haku, but I just wanted to ready you for how the ninja world is. I know you weren't my biological child, but you were the greatest son anyone could have asked for, and I'm very proud of you." But then at the end, it would say, "And go with those two. They seem to have a village where you can dwell at and not be ostracized and hated upon because of what you used to be. Because those two are the newly banished kids of the Hokage and the Uchiha clan head son." Sorry if that made no sense, but I meant to say was that these two are the Hokage's son and the Uchiha head son that have recently been kicked from the Leaf Village. And if they are there taking on that mission, then they obviously have a place where Haku would be safe at. And I just wanted to let you guys know that, so I'll return to the story now. And so Itachi would say, listen, I'm sorry for killing him. I let my rage consume me, and I didn't think to spare him or anything. He had pissed me off to an extent where I just wanted him dead. I craved for him to die. And then he'd look at me and he'd say, so why didn't you stop me earlier? And Haku would be shocked. He'd say, what do you mean stop you earlier? Could this guy stop you if you ever went out of control? And Itachi would nod saying, and then Haku would walk up and punch you. It wouldn't do any damage, but I know the intent behind it. He'd have tears in his eyes, and he'd say, so why didn't you? You could have saved Zabu. So why didn't you help him? And I'd say, because Zabuza died with a smile on his face. He enjoyed that fight, and if I would have interrupted it, then it would have been bad. And it would have looked as if, oh, I'm just this asshole who interrupts fights. And I'd say, but I can bring him back with a cost. And Haku would slap me, saying death isn't a joke. You can't just bring people back. And I'd say, make a deal with me then. If I bring him back to exactly how he was just now, but like not injured and bruised up and cut up and have holes through it, then you and Zabuza will join my village. And he'd go, fine, but if you can't, you have to let me kill you. And I'll just leave with your friend here. And I'd say, deal. I'd unseal Zabuza's body. I'd make a duplicate of the body. And I'd revive the original one. The wounds on his body would start to disappear. And he'd start moving, he'd twitch. And then he'd open his eyes and cough out a bit of blood. And I'd say, welcome back to the land of the living, Zabuza. And he'd look and see a copy of his body still dead on the ground. And he'd say, is that a clone or an illusion? And I'd say, no, you're talking and looking at me. And I'm not dead, so you mustn't be dead. And he'd say, so this is some type of kinship. And I'd say, no, that's a complete and utter copy of you. Oh, and Haku made a deal with me, so welcome to the village of the forgotten. Zabuza, Momochi, and Haku. And he'd look and ask, what type of deal did Haku and you make? And I'd say, if I revived you, you and Haku would join my village and would listen to everything I asked of you. Since, I'm your new Kage and all. And he'd say, what? Well, I'm technically the Kage, but I'm not the Kage. And he'd say, what do you mean? I'd say, I'm too young and inexperienced to be the Kage. So I handed it over to a trusted friend of mine. You may know him as the first Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. And by the way, the person I met who was in the Hokage's office, I meant to say was the Hokage's executive or second in command. And by the way, I revived all of the Hokages that died, and the third Hokage did not die. He's still alive and in the Leaf Village. because I do not need that asshole inside of my village. Sorry, but not sorry. And Tsunade and Jiraiya also visit the village here and there. He doesn't. They don't tell Minato, Kushina, Naruto, or Sasuke about it, or anyone in the village, to be frank. But they know of its existence, and they have been, and they know that the previous Hokage are alive. And the Hokage's executive is let's see, who would be a good executive for the Hokage? Let's just say it was a random guy who was filling in for Madara. Because Madara is the Shadow Hokage. He's not the executive, he's the Shadow Hokage of our village. Yeah, that makes sense. And he'd be shocked. He'd say, "What do you mean?" And I'd say, "Well, as I just said, I can revive people. Obviously, you're alive." And he'd say, "Is that my old body that died?" And I'd say, "You're in the body that died. That's just a copy of it." And I'd make a shadow clone, and I'd send that clone out, and it transformed going into the Leaf Village. And for plot reasons, Minato being Minato and being busy, he just takes Zabuza's body, give it to me for 1 million, no, 1 billion of Naruto, the Naruto universe currency, which I'm gonna assume is Ryu, and he'd give me 1 billion of it for his bounty, because I'm gonna say Zabuza is more notorious in this, and the clone would poof, and I'd get, well, it wouldn't poof, like it'd take the money to my village, and then it would poof. And Hashirama would accept the money. The second Hokage is also there, and he knows that Madara and Itachi are there. And he dislikes the rest of the Uchiha. I'm not saying like, oh, he's just a racist guy. Like, nah, he just, like, he dislikes the Uchiha of the Leaf Village, but he's cool with Madara and Itachi. And I know that's kind of cursed to hear. The second Hokage and Madara, cool. Kind of cursed. Especially after what he did to him in the fourth grade Shinobi War. hmm But yeah, they're cool. They worked past their differences. And so, yeah. And I'd look and I'd speak with Itachi, Zabuza, and Haku. I'd say, you guys will be a part of, well, you two will be a part of the people that follow us in the shadows. So you'll be, no, actually, I'll make you a part of my team, since we're the only team that takes missions in my village. The rest are either a part of the medical department or the strategy department. While we'll take on the attack and defense type missions, while the other teams in my village take on intel, stealth, and spying missions. Sometimes we even take on those missions too. But, and he'd go, and he'd be like, but, no problem. Sorry about that. And he'd say, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, you have to go speak with the Kage. And Hashirama, no, I'd say, you have to meet with the Shadow Hokage, Zabuza. Well, as you, Haku, just go to the Kage. Well, yeah, I'm gonna just say they're called the Hokage because, not like as in HOE, or just normal Hokage, right? It's just the Hokage. Even though we're the village hidden, we're the forgotten village. And we're still technically hidden, but like we're not hidden in anything. We're like basically a part of the Hidden Leaf Village, but we're not a part of the Hidden Leaf Village. It'll all make sense when I can think better. So for the next part, I'll try to have like the name of this village like completely down. But for now, while I had a good name for it, it's just the village of the forgotten. That's just the name of it. But this is where I'll be ending this part off. I have things I have to do, and yeah, I'll see you guys. Well, I'll see you guys when I'm making the next part of this, or the next part to what if me and Bon Ragto was in Blue Lock. Goodbye.